Thank you. So we are here, and hopefully you're here for the right presentation. We're going to talk about finding the right LMS, and I am Catherine Fortin. So we're going to be using WooClamp, and the link is also in the chat, but it's here also. So all the participation will be happening there. Oops. So just a little bit about me and my background. I have a certification in gamification. I have been in IT for over 30 years. Yes, I started when I was 12. And I've been working with Moodle since 2009. So let's get started here and just find out a little bit about you guys. What role do you play? And you should be able to answer more than one. And as you answer, you'll see on my screen, the questions will automatically update. So we've got IT, faculty. So we've got faculty, admin, and some IT. That's good to know. This is going to be pretty technical, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask or put them in the chat. So our agenda, we're going to quickly go over the background of the project that I was on, how we found the solution, a demo of the post findings, and proof of concept and such. So a little bit about the project. I was working with a big retailer. They had, hey, I turned the sound off on that. They had, shove that somewhere. It does say the sound is off, so who knows what's going on. Me in 3 years ago and 4 years ago now, and interviewed me because they were going to migrate off of their current LMS, which I think was Saba at the time. And I went through multiple interviews, talked to people, and one day I was in front of some people who said that they were going to go with Cornerstone, or they were thinking of it. And I had told them, I don't think Cornerstone's going to work for you. And I found out later, they never called me back, but that Cornerstone proponent. And 3 years after that, I was called back going with them saying Cornerstone didn't work out and we need a new LMS. So what was great about this project is I got to go through the start and beginning. And if you had all the money in the world, this is how you should really look at how to find the right platform that's going to fit your needs. So what are we trying to solve? What we're trying to solve is that the LMS wasn't fitting. They were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to fit into the LMS rather than getting an LMS that was going to fit for them. There was tons of inefficiencies with what would their system to conform. They have a very high-tech learning and development team. They were even using, they were doing a lot of 3D and virtual training and had a Unity coder on staff. And there was a ton of knowledge in their products, their stores. They're the experts. So if you're walking in, they need to know everything that you need to answer or that you might have a question about. So on demand, right this moment training is incredibly important to this company. So if we look at the challenges of their current LMS, they, there was no HTML. The pages were crazy. It looked like a directory root of a system. This is what it looked like when you logged in. They had a full-time HTML developer to make it look like this. And they were changing and content a week. So their current system, to get anything into Cornerstone that was usable, they had smart sheets. They'd go to the LMS, they'd have to design it and then add SurveyMonkey links because their current LMS was not capable of doing any kind of surveys. And then they'd have to wrap it in a SCORM, customize the SCORM because they did not have the bandwidth to stream any video. So the video had to live locally in every single store. So it was very complex. So thinking about what your requirements would be and a little bit about what the company sounds like that I'm talking about, let's jump into our next, it's not moving. We're stuck. We have to close it. Control. There we go. Control Enter if it won't move, Ted. So our next question, what do you think would be on an LMS wish list when you're thinking of functions? You can type in error. And we should see the questions or the answers start coming up. There we go. Oops. So ease of use, absolutely. Surveys, adaptable. Solution, incredibly important for this company. And the way the word cloud works, the more correlation, more people that put in the same answer, it'll make the text bigger. So you can see reporting is huge, definitely. So thank you. So on their wish list, they wanted personalized mobile training. They wanted to create micro-learning bites, easier training creation process. You saw it was a little extreme. Training accessible from all in-store devices, and we'll get more into that, and that the crew would be able to do training anytime. At this time, there was one computer in the back office that they could do training from, and that was it, no matter how big the store was. Some of them had 2 computers in the back, but they all carried iPads or iPhones to help customers, and they could not do any of the devices. And they wanted to be able to do store and corporate training on one LMS, which they were unable to do. So what it came down to is they wanted a one-stop platform to do personalized learning content coupled with gamification, micro-learning, and mobile experiences that empower the cast members to deliver the best client experience. So finding the solution. This is where I was brought in, and you saw this when you came in. The problem that they were having is, like probably all of us in every company, is they keep using the same system to fix the current problem, and they use that system that caused the current problem. So this was the insane extensive process, and this will be on the PDF of the slides. But I pushed back of what they were actually trying to solve and went through the stakeholders and where the solution was. We went out to vendors of LMSs with weighted criteria, what the goals were going to be. We ranked everything. The yellow boxes in here were added specifically when Moodle became part of this, and Moodle is different than other LMSs, and I had to backtrack and explain that to them. But this was the process of going through the entire process from vendor selection to final LMS to find the LMS that would work for them. So functional project goals. We wanted to increase the frequency of individual logins. People were getting so with the frustration of their LMS, they weren't logging in anymore. To actually complete the training, imagine that. And they wanted to eliminate the need to manually link to SurveyMonkey for feedback. And they wanted to cut the time for new content by 50% and reduce the admin time on publishing and the content delivery that would work on mobile devices. So we did a lot of vendor research, and we went from 80 vendors down these 13, if I'm counting right. Anyways, this is where we were when we started the RFP stage. And in the chat, take a guess of how many functional requirements they had. Anybody? Bueller? Go higher than that. Got to go higher than that. They actually had 201 functional requirements. And coming from IT project management, I was like, no, you cannot send 201 functional requirements. This was not even the IT technical requirements. You can't send them to a vendor going, we want you to meet all the criteria. So I pushed back and had them break them down into critical to future. And we got them broken down like that. And then I told them we were only going to focus on critical and high. Everything else was not going to the vendors. And the functional requirement categories, we broke them down into these categories and also had them organize them.
Catherine?
Yes.
Nikki, Nikki asked how long it took to figure out the 201.
When I walked in, they had already put together like 500. And I was like, and I told them no. And so we got down to 201, and I had to ask them, so if somebody walked into your store with 201 requirements, would you be able to help them? And they just kind of looked at me, and I said, exactly. So let's break these down on a scale of what's critical and what is considered future that you're not even, this is your wish, you don't even have it right now. Obviously you don't need it. And it was highly political. So that played into who's wanted what they thought they needed, just so they had their foot in the game still. So the vendor selection, here's the list of vendors and the weighted categories and the responses. At the end, it was 30% criteria was RFP, technology score, and the actual on-site demo. So some of these scores are pre-demo weighted, and some of these are snapshots of the post-demo. So if for some reason you are a numbers genius and say something doesn't add up right, just email me and I'll show you the details of the different steps along the way. So business weighted category, this is the functional, and these are the technical categories that we broke everything down in. So here comes the fun numbers. So these are the 6 that were in the demo, that made it to the demo phase. And you can see here that Moodle and Big Tin Can are neck and neck. And you can see where the admin, actually Miyagi was higher. Delivery, Big Tin Can went out. Reporting, nothing beats Moodle when it comes to reporting. And I've probably worked with more than 20 LMSs. Social, Moodle again, but these 3 were really neck and neck when you're talking about tenths of points. And user experience, Moodle fell incredibly short compared to Big Tin Can and Docebo. But overall was neck and neck. So when breaking it down by the functional requirements and tech, you can see that Moodle was on top for business requirements and for tech. But PlayerLink over here, which you guys should look at, because PlayerLink doesn't necessarily have to be an LMS, but they have a video and content streaming that would tie in nicely to any LMS if you need to have it cached locally because you have bandwidth issues within your sites. And here's the final scores going into moving into the demo phase.
Catherine?
Yes.
Dan had asked how many of those requirements actually were realistic.
I have the entire list of the requirements on a spreadsheet, and they had an argument for everything, but you know, it was like walking into a candy store with, you know, an unlimited gift card. They wanted everything they had ever seen at DevLearn and ATD conferences since they're getting a new one. Plus, they were looking at what they were trying to fix that they were dealing with their old system. So everything was possible, but when it came to replacing the current problems, it was trying to get them to focus at what they were trying to solve.
Right, the root cause. Cool.
Exactly.
Thank you.
No problem. So the top vendors came down to these 4. The bottom vendors were constantly out. The other vendors that were out, Totoro was actually a contender until we got to the mobile app. And for any of you that have worked a lot with Totoro over the years, they used to use the Moodle app, which cached everything locally. The new Totoro app does not, and that was the only reason why they were out of the game, was there was no caching abilities. So the on-site demo. The final vendors that were invited were these 6. And we're going to skip to, I had to, before we had Moodle come in, and I had to all of these things because they're all different in Moodle. And since we all live in the Moodle world, and every Moodle vendor that partners with sometimes has a problem going into a new company and not realizing they don't understand Moodle. We live in it, it's simple for us, but everybody was shocked that a company that is a global company that is known worldwide and has stores in countries all over the world, that's redundant, had no clue and had never. So there was a learning curve of several weeks of me to go in and create an entire presentation on why Moodle is different and what the benefits are. So post-demo outcomes. After they were on site and they got to do their presentation, this is where things started falling. So Miyagi dropped quite a bit. Big Tin Can stop. For the admin, Big Tin Can was a lot higher. Reporting, again, Moodle's at the top. So when we looked at the average scores, Moodle was at the top until you do the in-person presentation. And it had nothing to do with the partner. A lot of it had to do with the fact that this company was so irritated with LMS companies. They had already, you know, started with 80 before I had been hired to help them through this process. They had on big bold letters on the RFP, do not tell us what an LMS is, we already know. Um, so they wouldn't let the Moodle partner explain why Moodle was different. And part of it was political, but that's why the in-person presentation didn't go well.
Catherine, we got a couple of questions out there.
Okay, open source. They had never even thought of open source until I walked in the door and looked at their requirements and said, why aren't you looking at Moodle and Totara? So I actually took several off of their list and added 3, which were Moodle, Totara, and Adobe Prime. And all of those made it to, the last 8, but Totoro was out because of the app, the mobile app. I was surprised that there were several LMSs out there that I had never heard of, because I've been working in higher ed and corporate training with LMSs for over 10 years. And Miyagi, Big Tin Can, and PlayerLink, 3 that I had never ran into.
And then the other one was, why did Moodle fall or score so low in the user design, UX, and which version of Moodle
It
are you?
was the latest version of Moodle. So last year, 3.5, 3.6. Is that about right?
That's about right.
Yeah. So, because Moodle looks ugly, if you don't know how to design it or don't look for it. Um, they wanted less text. They were very, very concerned about the time to train and that it looked easy, and their training looked amazing. It was really impressive. Some of the best that I've ever seen in any organization. So, unless you had someone design Moodle that was 100% graphic driven, which the Moodle partner didn't. Actually, there were several Moodle partners involved, and none of them. It didn't come close to what Big Tin Can could do, or Miyagi. It looked about the same. It was on the same level as Adobe and Docebo. So, yeah, I can show you samples later if you want. But after the post demos, it came down to Big Tin Can and Moodle. And they're the ones that got to move into the proof of concept stage. But here's the technical scores. And Moodle was on top with PlayerLink number 2. But because Tech loved PlayerLink, but they had a horrible interface and it wasn't going to work, they would be back. And there was a lot of infighting between Tech and the business side, of Tech wanting to have priority or weighted more. But we kept trying to explain to them that no matter how great the back end is, if the users hate it, they're not going to use it, and they'll be in the exact same spot they are today. So if we look at the summary of average scores, the business in-person, the presentation, and the technical scores, we're back down to Big Tin Can and Moodle, neck and neck. So when we look at the project constraints at this point, 40% is dedicated their store networks, or 40% are dedicated to business applications. 20% is to the POS. If they don't make money, they're not in business. And then 40% is dedicated to the free Wi-Fi. So if they're going to add in any kind of streaming, they can't have any of this impacted. The technical constraints were devices have minimal storage and they weren't able to upgrade them. Video downloads are only allowed during restricted time because of the POS, especially during holiday seasons. No streaming whatsoever of the video, and current provisions, there were throttling. A lot of the stores, if they were in a mall, they were subject to whatever bandwidth the mall was bringing in, and then the battery on the devices. They needed to make sure the devices were available for customer usage at all times. So solutioning, we looked at offline support, we looked at local media servers, and we looked at how to reuse the devices they have. And what could we do with e-learning caching? So what we ended up doing is using their pre-existing hardware in the system and adding a multi-content storage. So proof of concept. How are we doing on time, by the way? We good, Ted?
Yep, you have 30 minutes.
Okay, good. So business rankings, the original rankings after the demo. So we went forward before proof of concept and broke down the scores a little bit more for the top 3. And again, Moodle was a very strong contender, and they didn't expect this. And Moodle kind of laughed at in the company, but they were allowed to keep it in because they have a application enterprise process that does the full evaluation and architecture before it's handed off to any internal IT or business department. And, you know, Moodle came out way up on top. So if you look at the business scores by category, Miyagi handled asset types better. Cataloging and having a elastic search was a huge priority for them. Personalization.
Do you know why Moodle keeps falling down in the content management sectors? Is it just this political environment at this company and they just kind of...
No, it's the tagging and the elastic search and the functionalities. So they wanted someone to be able to come in and search makeup and every single training that has makeup in it, and then hair and every single training to have hair.
Okay.
And they could put it in categories, but there wasn't any kind of tagging search in Moodle.
Right.
Even when we added Elasticsearch and where they'd have to do tags and would it search in the, not only in the category descriptions, but in each of the descriptions of the courses, Big Tin Can did it all.
Okay.
So again, Big Tin Can UX, it came out on top. So the technical scores, Moodle soared ahead of everything. And it was really hard. There was a lot going on with tech, and they started installing it on their own machines, and then they called a company that was in another country that was not a Moodle partner but said they did Moodle before and they were thinking of going with them. And I ended up having to pull Martin in and have a meeting with the company to explain to them why it's important to go to a Moodle partner if you're going with Moodle. And they almost went with a non-Moodle partner to run everything for them if they in that direction. Oops, let me go back to that. So at the end, with all the weighted scores, Moodle was still on top, but very close, and they went forward with the top 2 companies. And this is where we are today. Well, this is where we were in November. And now everything's been finished and they have made a selection. And actually Big Tin Can won and moved forward. And I think it was because they were a little afraid of open source. So, questions. Now that was a lot of data. And I can pop back to some slides if you'd like me to.
In your opinion, is Moodle still slightly better for general administration, management, adaptability for large organizations? I work for the state of Montana Department of Labor, and we're trying to
Yes,
move forward with a centralized learning management system with X number of admins, not a lot because you don't want to confuse everyone, but a few that are experts in it, and then try to get it out to over 150 employees consistently, regularly, whatever, easily and adaptable, so that it's
okay.
not email, it's not webinars, it's not PowerPoints, which is our current methodology because we don't have a different solution. And so we're trying to find, and I saw in another presentation here that in addition to, so Moodle is a learning environment generally geared towards teaching, schools, colleges, whatever, but a new partner that I've never heard of now has a Moodle workplace environment that's more adaptable to an organizational structure type of government, corporation, that type of thing.
I would look at LearnBook, which is the custom add-on from eCreators. It's really cool and it's impressive, but one thing that everyone should understand is the cost of Moodle would probably be, I don't know, for customizations and everything for this company, and with 5,000 users on concurrently, you know, probably, and all the hand holding this company would require, probably somewhere between 20 and 40,000 a year. The system they went with was like 600,000. So money was not an option. And so it's really impressive that Moodle made it to that level. Big Tin Can is being used in Tiffany's, Nike, these really huge companies. A lot of bio is using it also. So for Moodle to soar past, you know, Docebo and all these other ones that are more equal, that you see companies, you know, going with Docebo or Moodle or Adol, but Moodle surpassed all of those and was neck and neck with Big Tin Can. So unless you guys want to spend $1 million a year.
Right, no, and we definitely don't. And we have the open source in our state agency already anyways, and actually almost all of our agencies now in Montana has the open source latest version of Moodle, but that Moodle workplace with that one partner just seemed really intriguing because it was built more in the nature of a company or a governmental agency organizational structure and design that was easily manipulative, like the open source standard Moodle is. So it was just, I was just curious.
I would compare Workplace and LearnBook together,
okay,
and do a side-by-side comparison of
what goes.
The what you're trying to solve, because I think both of them will solve it, but it'll look different, and the pricing is probably a little different as well.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things a lot of companies don't think about when they are selecting an LMS, and this is someplace that I with presentations, is whatever you select, no matter who it is, make sure that you can back up your data at the course and the site level and take it with you. If the company is not willing to do that, don't sign a contract. I have been pulled in for a lot of the projects, including this one. They hired myself and my team to go in and help do the migration off of Cornerstone. And Cornerstone would not give them their data. It was ugly to move the data. And then we had to do some custom codes with their APIs, where Moodle has more APIs and more options than any other LMS I've ever worked with. And we have our own dev team and can custom code off of APIs, and we've done a lot of that for companies. But Big Tin Can just recently opened their APIs to the public. So
You said in the site the areas of course data and what?
Site level and
Site level.
course
Okay.
level data.
Good.
Moodle, you can get it out of easily. Blackboard,
Right.
I don't think still lets you have it. Several years ago, we ended up doing migrations from pasting from one course, from one monitor to another to rebuild the courses in Moodle coming out of Blackboard 6, I think it was.
Okay. Thanks for the discussion.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else?
I put it in the chat, but what was that concurrent user number that you mentioned as far as their design requirements?
5,000 concurrent. Actually, it might have been more than that. I think it was 5,000 at the corporate level plus 25,000 store employees across. This was just for North America. So they were trying to solve the North America before rolling it out to anything else. I think this is the first time I've gone through this material this fast, so I apologize. Any other questions? I can go back to any slides if you'd like. If there are no questions, you guys can have a few extra minutes back to your life before the next session. And just a little bit about my company. If you guys need help, we jump in and just help companies with LMSs, and we're women owned. And this is just some of the services we offer. The company is pleased with Big Tin Can, but they're a very complicated company and very needy. So I think any LMS company they went with, they would expect that because of their clout and status, that companies would bend over backwards for them. And that's kind of how they've acted with all the projects I've been on with them.
So definitely whoever was chosen was going to have to work for their money no matter what.
Oh yeah, yeah. Even if they got the contract, they drew the short straw.
Well, and before I'm going to stop recording, unless there's any other questions anybody has that would like to have it in the recording. We'll wait for a second for that. All right, I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay.